Hello everybody, and welcome to this, the first ever Q&A for the DiD channel. I did not think we'd ever get this far, but here we are. Those of you who have seen my videos on the King's Cross Fire and the Charge of the Light Brigade, the most recent uploads at the time of recording, will know that I asked for contributions for this special episode, and you did not disappoint. So, without further ado, let us dive straight in. Alina Popescu 872 asks, how did this descent into darkness begin? What gave you the idea? Well, first of all, Alina, buonasera. Always nice to see your name coming up in the comments. To your question, the channel began as a way of keeping myself entertained on long, boring night shifts. I used to work for the probation service here in the UK at an approved premises. Once all of our guys had gone to bed, there was nothing to do between around midnight and 6:30 or so. There are only so many Amazon wish lists that one can create, so I began watching documentaries on YouTube, which is one of my favourite pastimes. I had always been interested in the Yorkshire Ripper case, given my family's connection to it, and quickly realised that there was a massive number of interesting facts that every documentary misses out. So after a while, I decided that, you know what, I think I could do better here. So I simply just began writing. It took a long time and a lot of shifts to research everything that I wanted to, but after around 6 months or so, I think, it was finally finished. In the meantime, I had decided that I would also write about Jack the Ripper and Dennis Nilsen, and then my cousin told me about the Barry Prudhomme case, and so after a while I had 4 scripts all done and dusted, and then I did nothing. I sat on the scripts for around a year or so until July to August, about July-August of 2022. I had recently lost my job due to a significant deterioration in my mental health. This is why I always advocate for awareness of mental health. I decided that it would be very helpful for me to get back into writing, as it is a great distraction from other things. And then I kind of just struck upon the idea of writing the script about the Drublinga death camp. I think it was around September of that year that I was able to purchase a second-hand microphone, which I still use now because it works perfectly fine. And I just got started. It just sort of flowed nicely from there. And then, of course, I already had the other 4 scripts all ready to go, as well as the fresh stuff that I began to write. And that's pretty much what brings us to the current moment. I must, of course, thank my friends who gave me massive amounts of encouragement to get me started and to keep going with it. Had they not done that, I would probably not have bothered. So, there we go. So thank you for that one, Elena. I shall no doubt see you again in the comments in the future. Kelly McGrew2686 asks, are you enjoying your new path? I'm enjoying your new path immensely. I see that you have nearly 15k subs, that was at the time of writing, roughly 2 weeks after 10k. Well done you. Strap in for the ride, you deserve it. Well, thank you very much for saying so. You really are too kind. It's very humbling, trust me. Anyway, I have to say that I am very much enjoying the new path. The last 6 months have been an incredible journey. Although I will admit right now that it's still. I guess I must have some kind of feeling of imposter syndrome or something like that, and who knows. It's still it's still crazy to me every time I see the numbers on the screen. I'm just like, what? Oh, who knows. Anyway, the meteoric rise of the channel that kicked off in February, it was really utterly astounding. To see my first ever video, the Treblinka one, being absolutely just rocketing in the views, did something to me that is a rarity. It left me completely lost for words. And then, of course, other videos began to rise in sympathy, I guess, as well. And it's just gone from strength to strength ever since. Throughout everything, though, the one thing that always put a smile on my face has been all the great supportive comments from everyone. I check the YouTube Studio app on my phone probably hundreds of times a day, and I'm always blown away by the outpouring of support that I see from everyone. It really does make it all worthwhile, and I truly cannot thank all of you enough for that. As far as strapping in for the ride goes, I say hell yeah, but rest assured that I shall remain humble and grateful to all of you. I have never been one for ego or arrogance, so I shall never take any of this or you for granted. On that, you have my word, and my word is my bond. I shall keep writing and uploading for as long as I am still able to do so. Chesspiece3463 asks, after watching the Yorkshire Ripper episode, I want to know more about your mum and her career. Sadly, Mum, she rarely spoke about her days in the police, and at the time I did not have the foresight to ask her. Those of you who have watched the Peter Sutcliffe and Barry Prudham videos will have heard my anecdotes from her, from those cases, but sadly I don't really have many more. This is a point that really does pain me greatly, and I would have loved to have learned so much more from her, but I don't know, as a kid you just don't really... You kind of assume your parents are going to be around forever, and yeah, she wasn't, sadly. And but I did at least correct the mistake of with my dad, of making sure that I always asked him all of his little stories from because he was a train driver, so I always asked him about all the many funny stories and bits and pieces that he went through on the railways, and there's quite a few of those as well, actually. But anyway, just so that not all of you are entirely disappointed on this question, I can relate a couple of the many funny stories that did occur on one night way back when. This first one did not involve my mum, but involved her colleagues in North Yorkshire Police, and it's so funny, it's got to be told. At the time, I'm not 100% sure when this was, but it would have been somewhere, I imagine, mid-80s, something like that. There was a spate of stolen vehicles in the area, and it was decided to attempt to track down these cars and obviously arrest the occupants. For this, they would of course need some unmarked vehicles. They did not keep very many on hand at the time, and those that they had were obviously in use. So, decided to borrow from the local branch of the car retailer, DC Cook. If you're old enough to remember them, look for the DC Cook sign. Anyway, the unmarked cars were loaded up with coppers and placed at strategic locations on all the major roads, and were given a list of the suspect vehicles' registrations to look out for. This became known as Operation Nighthawk, which inevitably got renamed Operation Shitehawk amongst the relief, because that's just how coppers' minds work. The whole night went with virtually zero action, save for a bit of banter over the radio. Then, all of a sudden, a call came in from a marked Panda car that one of the stolen vehicles had been spotted and pulled over. So as you can imagine, this was met with a small cheer. Then, a couple of minutes later, a follow-up call came over the waves that the suspect car was in fact full of North Yorkshire police officers. It turns out that the manager at DC Cook had been handling and selling all these hot motors. I'm not sure if it was deliberate or not, but you can imagine the whole thing became a complete farce and everyone was in tears of laughter. So the lesson here, make sure your sources are trustworthy, for God's sake. And another one that did involve my mum was that she was out one night with a male colleague in a Panda car on patrol, and they happened upon a car in a lay-by that had the interior light on and the back door open, and the car was rocking rhythmically back and forth, if you know what I mean. So, they parked up and got out. The male colleague went round to the open door, grabbed the poor guy by his ankles and whipped him out of the car in one swift motion, while Mum poked her head through the back window at the other side, looked down at the surprised and shocked female occupant and said to her, "I think this is what is known as Coppers Interruptus." Oh, classic Mum. She was always quick with the one-liners. Oh, God. Poor sots. Anyway, there are a couple of other stories that I could tell, but they are liable to cause a lot of offence with what actually happened. It's basically one of two reactions. You're either going to be shocked and angry, or, like me, who has a sick sense of humour, like a really sick sense of humour, you'll probably piss yourself laughing. But it's not worth alienating one half of the audience. So, suffice to say, if they'd happened today, there would have been a massive public uproar, and to be honest, quite rightly so, but still, they were kind of funny. Anyway, so back to Mum. She, when she met my dad and decided to move in with him, she was in the Special Constabulary, which is basically volunteer coppering in your spare time. It's not like the regulars. But anyway, so she left the Special Constabulary and moved from York to Cleethorpes, and they married on the 17th of May 85, and I was born on the 15th of November 86. Despite Mum not holding a paid job after I was born, as far as I'm aware, she did throw herself into many different volunteer projects. Variously, she was a qualified coach in the sport of lawn bowls, and was a top player. She worked for the Victim Support Service in the local courts. She was a secretary for a club for the blind and partially sighted, joined a singing group called the Troubadours, which visited care homes and sang for all the residents, all the songs from the 40s, 50s and 60s, and Rodgers and Hammerstein, that sort of thing. So I have a deep love of those songs because I remember them quite well. Both my mum and dad, they were both very musical. I was raised on folk music, particularly Irish folk music, which is odd given that we're not an Irish family, but the music is still awesome and I still love it to this day, and you should hear me sing some Irish ballads. Maybe that'll be another spin-off channel at some point, I don't know. Let me know if you fancy a bit of that. We were always singing. The house was always full of music and comedy, laughter. It was a brilliant way to grow up. I really did have a wonderful childhood in that sense, and they were both amazing parents. They were always laughing and joking. This is where I get my sense of humour from. Sadly, of course, my mum died from complications from cervical cancer on April the 1st, 2001. I think if she could have picked any date, April Fool's Day would have been the one, so I'd especially love to know what she thinks about what I'm doing now with the channel. I'm sure both my mum and my dad would absolutely love it. They always encourage me to, with my love of history. When I was in primary school, for Americans, that's grade school. At the time when everyone else was reading the sort of boring kids books about, what we call Janet and John books. Janet went to the shops and did this and that and the other. They're all terrible and they're all really patronising and boring, and but they're obviously for a basic level of reading. But at that same time, when everyone else was reading those in school, I was reading a biography of Isambard Kingdom Brunel. So no wonder I didn't show much interest in reading the school books. But so I was greatly encouraged to always be advancing myself. The one thing that I've always been rubbish at is maths. I do not do maths. Words are my thing. Anyway, next question. Caution Tosser, great name by the way, asks, what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? What do you mean? An African or European swallow? I don't know that. How do you know so much about swallows? Well, you have to know these things when you're a king, The Prussian asks, have you heard of the Giant of Kandahar? Honestly, I haven't. However, I did do a quick Google search, and it's at least given me the cliff notes. I was interested to read about this, though, as there are multiple accounts of strange goings-on in Afghanistan. Russian, British, and US troops stationed there over the years have reported paranormal occurrences. Now, of course, there are many who will instantly dismiss such experiences, but I prefer to keep an open mind on it myself. I've experienced a few things that I genuinely cannot explain in the past, so I am more ready to listen to others when it comes to this sort of thing. Perhaps this is a potential future topic. It's been a while since I did a paranormal video, for sure. But in the meantime, for those of you wanting to listen to a bit more, I would say Bedtime Stories, great channel by the way. They covered these happenings in Afghanistan. I think the episode was entitled something along the lines of "There is something in the desert." They recount some of these truly sort of chilling experiences that various soldiers have related down the years. So I would say check them out. Moving on, Jeanette Hines 4253 asks, have you ever covered a story and thought, I can't do this anymore because it was so heavy on your mental health? That is a bloody good question, to be fair. As worrying as it may first appear, no. There have been times when I have been left angry at particular details, such as the murder tape of Leslie Ann Downey by the Moors murderers, or Fred West raping his own daughter. Yeah, things like that. They have made me sort of step away for a day or two, or either take a complete break or to jump onto another script instead. But sooner or later, I do just get back into it and get the project finished. At the moment, as I record this, I'm also looking into research. Well, I'm actually writing the script about the murder of James Bulger, which is a really, really bad case from 1993 in Britain. Yeah, that's tough going, but it is worth it. Again, it's just one of those things where it's a story that's worth telling. It's been quite heavy going so far. I think I'm about maybe halfway or so finished, and already it's a bit like, this one's tough, but we shall soldier on. Big D Mac 33 asks, will you consider tackling any of the following: the Lacarnal House and Grenfell Tower fires, which are linked; the Mull of Kintyre Chinook crash, where it has been long rumoured and is an open secret amongst retired RUC and British Army intelligence that wiping out the majority of the UK's Northern Ireland Intelligence Group was a prerequisite to the IRA agreeing to sign the Good Friday Agreement. Well, absolutely, the Grenfell Tower fire is very much on the list. A thoroughly horrid event and a lesson that seems to be very slow in being learned in true governmental fashion. Some things never change. Admittedly, I'm not familiar with the Lacarnal House fire, but that doesn't usually stop me from learning and writing about it, so I appreciate the suggestion. When it comes to all matters, IRA and Northern Ireland, a resounding yes. As someone who was raised on Irish folk music has previously said, I've always held an interest in Irish history. Over the, hopefully, years to come of the channel, I shall be covering as many aspects of this long conflict as possible. There are so many individual events to cover. Bloody Sunday, the Omagh bombing, the attack on Brookborough Barracks, the Easter Rising, many, many others. I have a very good friend who is a member of the Royal Military Police as well, so I shall ask him if there are any extra details that he'd like to, or be, feel comfortable in contributing to the stories. So I'm sure that if he agrees, that will be a valuable resource of information. I didn't know specifically about the Mull of Kintyre Chinook crash, but always willing to look into a fresh topic that I didn't know anything about previously. I look forward to looking into that, actually. That will be quite interesting. So again, thank you for the suggestion. Sir Liv, I hope I pronounced that correct. What type of content do you personally favour? True crime or engineering disasters, etc., and why? Also, do you have more disasters planned for the near future, like perhaps the Saint-Michel de Maurienne railway disaster of 1917, a more or less direct equal to Quintin's Hill? I would say, to be honest, I prefer military-based content. Military history is a particular specialism of mine, military and naval, and it usually offers a chance to talk about weapons and tactics as well, which is even better. The true crime content is intensely interesting, as I do love to explore the mentality of individuals concerned. I'm one of those people who loves to analyse others' behaviour and the reasoning behind it. I'm pretty much completely desensitised to crime scene photographs ever since my first exposure to such things when I watched my first ever serial killer documentary, which incidentally was called The Diary of Jack the Ripper and narrated by the legend that is Tom Baker. That whole programme both terrified and fascinated me equally. I think I must have only been about 10 or 12 or so, something like that. Engineering disasters are, I don't know, I kind of find them similar in the way they're investigated to that of a criminal investigation. One has to identify exactly what happened and what led up to that moment. It's fantastic that I get to sort of converge so many different passions into one project such as this channel. So I can literally talk about, well, anything that sort of interests me, I guess. Then, of course, we have the Holocaust and genocide videos, which are harrowing and interesting in equal measure. I think it's vital that such stories are told, as it helps to give a voice to those who can no longer speak. And, of course, remind people that these things really did bloody happen. But overall, I would say, yes, the military topics are the one that would overall win the day for me. But I enjoy writing every topic that I cover, so, you know, it was very deliberate naming the channel Descent into Darkness. You know, I didn't just want to become another murder channel. Keep it nice and broad, and, you know, you can attract, obviously, a wider audience, which is always nice. Green Dragon 4058 asks, is there anything that you will not cover? How far back will you cover things? He says, I know I gave 2 questions. I hope that didn't break the rule. Not at all. No rules broken whatsoever, mon ami. Honestly, I can't think of anything that I wouldn't cover. As long as it sits within the scope of the channel, I'm happy to write about pretty much anything. I'll also be looking to expand a little bit my horizons to cover such utterly deplorable crimes such as those of Jimmy Savile, Richard Huckle, Gary Glitter, Ian Watkins, etc. These will include all of the worst details that can be put into the spoken word. The raison d'etre of the channel was that I always promise to give the full story, so I must deliver and hang the consequences. To my mind, I don't believe there is a limit on how far back I would go. There's plenty of bad things that occurred throughout all history, particularly in the so-called biblical times, so yeah, why not? Can't think of anything off the bat, but I'm sure there'll be plenty of suggestions flooding in. The Dan Jackson. Out of all your research, which case affected you the most? Yeah, without a doubt, the Moors murders and the Wests. This is one that definitely affected me the most because of the child abuse aspect. Anything to do with children or animals instantly gets my blood boiling. On both of those occasions, I had to step away a couple of times and jump onto something else to sort of detox my mind, I guess. Of course, it is difficult to learn about, but then having to put them into my own words as well, it can make me feel a little sullied by it all, I guess you could say. But ultimately, I feel that it is necessary, as the story deserves to be told, and, you know, deserves to be told in full. You know, trust me that if any of you are repulsed by any particular details, so am I. You know, I am human as well, I'm told. And finally, Ero830 asks, oh my days, asks, do you believe in life after love? Well, Ero830, what am I supposed to do? Sit around and wait for you? Well, I can't do that. There's no turning back. I need time to move on. I need love to feel strong, because I've had time to think it through, and maybe I'm too good for you. Oh dear. Can't beat a bit of share. Thank you very much for that. At least we ended it on a bit of a laugh. So I will give you my usual outro. I hope you found it all entertaining and interesting. I hope I answered all of your questions to your satisfaction, and I certainly appreciate the time taken to put them to me. Feel free to reply to the pinned comment on this video for any further questions for a future AMA, which I think I'll probably save them all up until maybe if we're lucky enough to get to either the 50 or 100k mark, I don't know. I am so completely blown away by the outpouring of support that I see on a daily basis. I would never have thought that something that just started out as just to kill time on a night shift would end up where we are right now. 20k subs at the time of writing, and on our way to 1.5 million views. That really does make my head go... I can't believe it every time. A most sincere and heartfelt thank you goes out to every single one of you that has joined me on my journey. My Patreon supporters, my subscribers, my regular comment contributors, and just my casual viewers. Every single one of you make this worthwhile and make me want to keep doing this for as long as I possibly can. I love every single one of you, and there's nothing you can do about it. So, onwards and upwards, and until we meet again, take care of yourselves, and I shall see you on our next descent into darkness.